So, thanks for this interview, Stephen. It's an honor to interviewing you. So, can you talk a little about the origins of the home tool?
Thank you. It's been an absolute honour for me to come here to Juconi and to the conference, and second time, so thank you very much for inviting me. The home inventory is a tool that was devised by Caldwell and Bradley in the States, based in Arkansas. It was first devised in the 1960s, and it's a tool designed to assess the child's experience of care in the home. It has a number of subscales to enable one to measure different aspects of the care provided the child in the home environment: stimulation, emotional responsiveness, academic stimulation, and so forth. The tool is one that's been used in research for many, many years. In the UK, in England and Wales, when the assessment framework was brought in 2000, the home inventory was one of the tools that the government wanted to use as a means of gathering information for assessments. In order to use it for that purpose, Professor Tony Cox devised a semi-structured interview to help gather information for the purposes of being able to score the home inventory, but more importantly for the purposes of obtaining qualitative information about the child's experience of care. Not only that provided by the main caretakers, but also it related to the environment that the child had in the home. So the interview schedule took a family and the child from the minute the child got up right through to the end of the day.
Okay, so the entire day?
The entire day. And the aim is to say who got up first, what happened next, what happened about breakfast, then what happened, who went to school, what happened then, what about lunch. It would depend on the age of the child. If it's a baby, you'd be thinking of lunch at home, but if it's a child, you might move to the child's experience in school and ask the child about that. Who picked the child up from school, what happened, what happened about homework, were there any difficult moments in the day? Can you tell me a bit more about that? What happened next? So the interview style is quite gentle, and it frequently asks for more detailed information. So could you tell me a bit more about that?
So it's kind of fluent.
It's
fluent.
Yes, it helps the flow. And we also ask about who went to bed last. Did anyone get up in the night? Okay. And then what happened? So it's an interview that was devised for going through the day. So with the home inventory, what one obtains is not only qualitative information through that interview, but one also obtains quantitative information because of the scores. Okay. And the scores help measure or give an indication of whether there's a concern about the child's experience of care overall, or whether there's a concern about specific areas. That can help point to areas for intervention. But importantly, using any standardized assessment tool, you cannot just rely on the scores alone in the individual case. So therefore, what's important is the triangulation of information. So whether the results of the scores from the home inventory add up to what one obtained during the interview, and add up with other reports that there might be about the child's experience in the care of the family. The interview focuses primarily on one child, but one can obtain the experiences of the other children. There are home inventories for children aged 0 to 3, 3 to 6, 6 to 10, and 10 to 14. 10 to 14 can be used with 15-year-olds and so forth. There are also disability-adapted versions, so there are adaptations for children who have sight difficulties, hearing difficulties, general developmental delay, or orthopedic issues.
So it's very complete. And you're using it in the same way that it's used in the States, or do you have to make some adaptation?
Well, for the purposes of research in the States and also in practice in the States, the semi-structured interview that was developed in England and Wales is not used in the States.
Okay.
So there are suggestions for interviews and prompts, but not a detailed semi-structured interview. The benefit of the semi-structured interview is that you ask as many questions as you need to, but you don't have to ask them all.
Okay.
If you get the information from one question, you don't ask the next 10. A semi-structured interview, you ask as much as you need to ask.
Okay, sounds like it can be relaxed and it's good for flows, the interview with the family, because you can make this question just as open that it could be.
Exactly, there's an emphasis on open questions. Sometimes one needs to drill down for detail, but it's maintaining openness is key in what one's doing. So the interview techniques are pretty similar to those that are used in various of Juconi's projects.
Okay.
It's pretty familiar sort of interview techniques. It's an instrument that really aims, and the interview approach aims to really ascertain strengths as well as difficulties. It's a focus on being able to identify strengths as well as difficulties that might need further work.
After all these years that you are sharing the tool and with all your experience, what are the benefits that all the organizations, because it's not just in the UK, you are going to other parts in the world, so it's worldwide. So what is the main benefits that the organization can have from this tool?
Just before I answer that directly,
okay.
One of the key things is that using the approach enables one to access the experience of the child. And when one's trying to hear the voice of the child, it's important to be able to understand the child's experience, because by tracking and understanding the child's experience, you can then engage with the child about their feelings and their views. So that's one important element with it. In terms of working with different organizations using it, for training purposes, the key area is that people are able to practice using the tool and then review their use of it. Okay. So the training program is to have a day of developing an understanding of the home inventory, how it's structured, and about the interview technique, because the interview technique is critical. Okay. Then people need to practice using it. And we've arranged with Juconi that actually the second day people will actually go out and do a practice interview with a family and children. And then the next day of the training, one can review how that went. Yeah. And actually practice more scoring of interviews and more interview technique. In the UK, we have a third day's training, but the reality of costs and so forth mean that we're going to try and work it with 2 days training and some Skype or FaceTime support to do that. Critical to embedding any new approach is that there's managerial support, supervisory support for workers using it. In the first instance, we suggest workers go out in pairs, because when one's focusing on an interview technique, it's hard to take notes. Okay. So it's quite useful that one person take notes, the other person focuses on the interview technique. That means that when they get back to their office, they can score the interview together, and they score it according to a glossary. So they have to check the glossary with the information they've got, and by doing that together, they can develop consistency, which is then beneficial to the agency, because it can see that its staff are actually consistent in their use of it, and therefore place more reliance upon it. We also recommend that we have evaluations of outcomes in terms of people's confidence in using it, and reviewing how it contributes to the overall assessment that the agency is undertaking. The home inventory will not cover every area that is required for an assessment. So, for instance, it doesn't necessarily cover, it'll cover parenting very well, but it doesn't necessarily cover some of the wider family and social environmental issues, and you may need to cover those with additional questions. Like
use of the resources around community, or how they are connected to community.
Exactly, you may get hints about that. It doesn't actually demand, the interview doesn't really go into family history, and yet we know that that is going to be relevant.
Sure.
So therefore, people using it understand they need to ask additional questions about that. For agencies, having a forum, whether it be in teams or in supervision, to actually encourage the use of the home inventory and review how it's going, will embed it. We've been using it in the UK with staff who are both qualified and unqualified, and particularly unqualified staff who are relatively new to work in the area find the structure of it very helpful. They know when they're starting an interview with a family, they usually start by saying, well, this is the first time we've met, I don't know you, it would help me to understand a bit about family life before anything else, and usually the easiest thing to do is to talk about a day in the family's life.
Yeah.
Yesterday.
It's not about history, it's just a day, and it's part of all the process in the family. So that will not give you all the information.
No,
you mean.
but it engages all members of the family who are present in the interview, because you're interested in everyone's experience. And again, it's rather like when in Juconi, where you first of all engaging families, you have them all together in a circle, you're trying to engage and value everyone. It's the same approach.
Yeah. And everybody has a place in the family session, and everybody has a place in the assessment, so it's considering all the family.
Indeed, and it also offers parents and children an opportunity to review their day and review their life and events in their lives. So for instance, I interviewed a father who had 3 children, both all under 7, with quite extensive needs, and the area that came up showing a concern was that of stimulation. And the father said to me, I don't understand that. And I said, well, how much are you able to do with the children at home? And he said, well, I maybe don't do much. The next time I saw him, he'd been and made appointments with every teacher to learn about the things that he could additionally do to improve the academic stimulation that he was able to offer children in quite pressuring circumstances, caring for them on his own.
Okay, great. So just for finalize it, what would be the expectation that you have to Juconi use in the home tool?
Expectations probably a bit strong. I would hope.
Okay.
I would hope.
Your hopes.
My hope would be that people would use it regularly, practice, feel comfortable with it, and find a place for it amongst all the other approaches that Juconi has, so that it dovetails with Juconi's approaches and becomes part of the Juconi assessment and intervention protocol.
Okay, so thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.